Every 75 years, something appears in the sky, and almost every time it has appeared, people have connected it with disaster. In the year 1066, it showed up, and one of England's most brutal wars followed, the Battle of Hastings. In 1910, when it appeared again, panic spread across the world so intensely that people began buying gas masks to protect themselves from what they thought was poisonous gas. For thousands of years, whenever this object lit up the heavens, people treated it as a warning of death. This is Halley's Comet, a celestial mass of ice and dust that emerges from the darkest reaches of the solar system, swings around the sun, and then vanishes back into the darkness. Its orbit is so massive that if you see it once in your lifetime, there is a good chance you will never live to see it again. So when scientists realized in 1980 that this cosmic monster would return in 1986, the world understood just how important that moment would be. Because if that opportunity was missed, the next chance would not come until 2061, by which time most of the scientists alive then would no longer be around. So the entire world began preparing to chase this object. America made plans, Europe made plans, Japan made plans. But what the Soviet Union decided to do was completely unbelievable. They did not just want to go near Halley, they wanted to do something even more extreme. First, they would land on the most dangerous planet in the solar system, Venus, where the temperature reaches 475 degrees Celsius and the air is filled with sulfuric acid. They would perform research there and then use the gravity of that very hell to launch themselves toward the comet. That mission was called Vega, and it involved 2 spacecraft. And when those 2 spacecraft finally reached Halley, they found something in the comet's dust that helped reveal the secret of how life may have begun on Earth. At the same time, they also discovered something on this monstrous comet that made people fear it even more. But what exactly did the Soviet Union see out there? That is what we are going to uncover in today's episode. So hello guys, welcome back to XY Lumi, and let's jump into another fascinating episode. Now let's go back to the beginning. The year is 1682. A 26-year-old young man in England is staring up at the night sky. His name is Edmund Halley, and above him is a glowing streak, something the rest of the world is treating like an omen of death. People are terrified. They are praying in temples, mosques, and churches. But Halley does not panic. Instead, he does something no one else thinks to do. He studies it. He tracks the path of that glowing object. He records its position. He calculates its speed. And then he does something truly extraordinary. He begins digging through old records. He checks records from 1607, when a similar glowing object had appeared. Then he examines records from 1531, then from 1456. And when he compares their paths, he notices something strange and remarkable. They are all the same object. The same celestial body passing near Earth through the solar system once every 75 to 76 years. This was the same object that people had linked to catastrophe for thousands of years, because again and again during its cycle, some major tragedy seemed to unfold on Earth, and people lost their lives. In 1705, Halley made a bold prediction. He said this object would return again in 1758, but Halley died in 1742, 16 years before that date arrived. And yet, on the night of December 25th, 1758, when a German farmer looked up and saw that glowing streak in the sky, the world realized Halley had been right. For the first time in history, a human being had successfully understood the pattern of a cosmic monster. And from that moment on, the object became known as Halley's Comet. But was there ever really any connection between its appearance and the disasters that followed on Earth? To answer that, we first need to understand what Halley's Comet actually is. And that is not easy, because how do you truly study something that you might only see once in your lifetime, and only if you are lucky? That question haunted scientists throughout the 20th century. And that is why, when they realized in 1980 that Halley would return in 1986, they knew this was their shot. If they failed to solve its mystery then, the next opportunity would not come until 2061, long after many of them were gone. The moment that realization hit, space agencies around the world began preparing missions to intercept it. The plan to study Halley was actually quite simple on paper. Fly past it from a very close distance and capture as many pictures and videos as possible, so scientists could study its size and surface in detail. America, Europe, and the Soviet Union were all racing to do this, but there was a twist. While the other countries only wanted to pass by Halley and gather images, the Soviet Union wanted to do something far more ambitious. They decided they would not just target Halley, they would also target Venus on the way. Two targets in one mission. First Venus, then Halley's Comet. That is exactly why the mission was called Vega. The Ve came from Venera, the Russian name for Venus, and the Ga came from Gale, the Russian pronunciation of Halley. What the Soviet scientists did not realize at the time was that this mission would go on to achieve two incredible breakthroughs that would reshape how humanity understood both planets and comets. Now the obvious question is this: why did they plan to send the mission to Venus first? Why not go straight to Halley's Comet? The answer is that with the launch energy and mission design available at the time, a direct path to Halley was not practical. So Soviet engineers came up with a clever workaround. The spacecraft would travel first to Venus. There it would release Venera landers toward the planet's surface. Then it would use Venus's gravity as a slingshot to gain speed. That gravity assist would hurl the spacecraft forward and send it toward Halley's Comet. Just think about how insane that sounds. First go into hell, do scientific work there, and then use the power of that same hell to launch yourself toward a cosmic monster. And yes, when I say hell, I mean it literally. Venus is a planet where temperatures reach 475 degrees Celsius, where the pressure is so extreme it could crush a human body in an instant, and where the atmosphere contains sulfuric acid. And despite all of that, the Soviet Union decided they would send a lander there, float a balloon there, and collect data there. It was practically madness. To make this happen, the Soviets built two nearly identical spacecraft, Vega 1 and Vega 2. Each one weighed roughly 4,920 kilograms. Both were equipped with cameras, gas-detecting instruments, sensors capable of measuring the weight and chemical composition of dust particles, tools for measuring magnetic fields, and one especially fascinating device, a 3.4-meter helium balloon designed to float through the clouds of Venus and measure the winds there. All of that was packed into the two probes, and in December 1984, both spacecraft began their journey. Vega 1 launched on December 15, 1984, from Baikonur Cosmodrome. 6 days later, on December 21st, Vega 2 launched as well. Together, the two probes moved out through space toward their target. Ahead of them lay a 6-month journey to Venus. Everything was unfolding according to plan. But the real test would begin only when they arrived there. On June 11, 1985, Vega 1 finally reached Venus, and that is when the most dangerous part of the mission began. The spacecraft released a round capsule, and inside that capsule were two major components: a lander that would descend to the surface of Venus, and a balloon that would float in its clouds. The moment the capsule entered Venus's atmosphere, it was surrounded by sulfuric acid clouds. The temperature began climbing, the pressure began climbing, and in the middle of that inferno, the parachute deployed, and the lander began its slow descent. As it descended, it measured everything: temperature, pressure, chemical composition, and more, transmitting all of that data back. Then the lander reached the surface of Venus, where the conditions were almost unimaginable: 475 degrees Celsius and 90 atmospheres of pressure. That is the kind of pressure you would experience around 900 meters below the ocean. In that hellish environment, the lander began analyzing the soil and sent its findings back to Earth. But the real magic of the mission came from the balloon. While the lander continued downward, the balloon separated and began floating in Venus's clouds at an altitude of about 54 kilometers. This balloon achieved something no one had ever done before. It directly measured the speed of the winds inside Venus's atmosphere. Scientists discovered that at that altitude, the winds were moving at around 1 meter per second. This was the first time such data had ever been collected. Vega 1's balloon floated for 46 hours. 4 days later, Vega 2 also reached Venus and released its own capsule. Vega 2's balloon remained in the Venusian sky even longer, floating for nearly 60 hours. That alone would have been a major scientific success. But as amazing as that part was, it was still only half the mission. The real objective still lay ahead. Once their work at Venus was complete, both Vega spacecraft used Venus's gravity to accelerate forward. That gravity assist gave them an additional speed of about 3.2 kilometers per second. It was the perfect swing-by. In a way, Venus itself pushed them toward Halley, and then began a long, silent journey lasting 9 months. Deep in the darkness of space, the two probes flew alone. No sound, no light, just two machines advancing steadily toward a cosmic monster. Now there is something important to understand here, because it made the upcoming encounter feel almost like a one-way mission. Halley's Comet was racing around the sun at tremendous speed, and the Vega spacecraft were approaching from the opposite direction. That meant the relative speed at the moment of encounter would be around 78 kilometers per second. At that speed, even a tiny particle of dust striking the spacecraft could hit like a bullet, and the region around Halley was full of dust. So everyone understood the risk. The probes would go in, collect as much data as they could, and there was a very real chance they would never come out intact. Then, on March 6, 1986, the day the Soviet scientists had been waiting for over 2 years finally arrived. Vega 1 made its closest approach to Halley's comet. The distance was about 8,890 kilometers. Its camera turned on, and for the first time in history, humanity saw the true face of Halley's comet. It was dark, irregular, twisted, a strangely shaped body around 16 kilometers long and 8 kilometers wide, and from its surface, jets were erupting, jets of dust and gas blasting out as sunlight heated the comet. During the flyby, Vega observed one especially large jet spinning in a circular pattern, and throughout the encounter its camera captured image after image. The dust instruments reported that the amount of dust was far greater than expected. But the real shock came when scientists analyzed the chemical makeup of those dust particles. Inside them they found carbon, hydrogen, nitrogen, and oxygen. In other words, organic material. The very same basic ingredients that over immense stretches of time could lead to bacteria, then fish, then humans. Those building blocks were hidden inside the dust of this comet. In fact, scientists estimated that 42 to 54% of the comet itself consisted of organic matter, an astonishing number. That discovery changed everything. It suggested that comets like Halley may have been the vehicles that delivered the seeds of life to Earth billions of years ago. Then, 3 days later, on March 9, 1986, Vega 2 made its own close flyby. This time, the probe passed even nearer, at a distance of about 8,030 kilometers, allowing it to capture some of the clearest images ever taken of the comet. But something strange had happened. When Vega 1 passed by 3 days earlier, it had seen strong, dramatic jets. Vega 2, however, found a far calmer object. In just 3 days, Halley's activity had dropped significantly. That alone showed how unpredictable comets really are. Together, Vega 1 and Vega 2 sent back around 1,500 images of Halley's comet. And considering the technology available in 1986, capturing that many images of such a mysterious object from those distances was an extraordinary scientific achievement. But Vega had another crucial role, one that very few people know about. Europe had also launched a spacecraft toward Halley called Giotto. Giotto's mission was even more dangerous, because it needed to pass far closer to the comet, around 600 kilometers away. But for that to happen, scientists needed accurate information about where the comet's center was and where its jets were erupting from. And that was exactly the information Vega provided. The images and data sent back by Vega helped guide Giotto onto the correct path. Without Vega, Giotto might have missed its target entirely. And that is what makes this story both remarkable and a little sad. In the middle of the Cold War, this became one of those rare moments when scientific knowledge crossed enemy lines. Rival powers were indirectly helping each other through data. Giotto made its flyby on March 13th, and its images were clearer, so history remembered Giotto more. But Vega had done it first. Vega captured the first encounter. Vega delivered the first images. Vega sent back the first crucial data. Vega showed the way, and someone else received most of the credit. Today, those Soviet Vega missions are almost forgotten, and that is one of the main reasons I wanted to make a detailed video on them. Because when I first read about these two spacecraft, I immediately felt that missions which contributed this much to science should never have faded so quietly from memory. But now there is another question. Why did people fear Halley's comet so much in the first place? Why did they keep linking it with destruction? The answer is simple. In ancient times, people had no telescopes, no satellites, and no modern science. So if a long glowing object with a bright tail suddenly appeared in the sky, people were terrified. They believed it was a sign from God, a warning that something terrible was about to happen. And then there were the coincidences. In 1066, when Halley appeared, the Battle of Hastings took place in England, and thousands died. In 1456, when it returned, plague was sweeping across Europe, and the Ottoman Empire attacked Belgrade. In 1835, when it appeared again, America suffered a major cholera epidemic. Today, science tells us these events had no real connection to the comet. They were simply coincidences in timing. But people living in those earlier centuries did not have that scientific understanding. To them, the pattern looked obvious. Whenever that glowing tail appeared in the sky, death seemed to follow. And the greatest panic of all came in 1910. That year, scientists announced that Halley's tail contained cyanogen gas, a toxic gas. And even worse, Earth was expected to pass through the comet's tail. That was enough to trigger mass fear across the world. People rushed to buy gas masks. Many shut themselves inside their homes. Some were so terrified that they reportedly took their own lives. Later, scientists realized that the gas in the tail was so incredibly diffuse that it posed absolutely no danger to Earth. But by then, the damage to the public imagination had already been done. For millions of people, Halley had become permanently associated with death. So now we arrive at the final question. What happened to the Vega missions after they completed their flybys of Halley's comet? After March 1986, both probes continued sending whatever remaining data they had back to Earth. For a few more weeks, signals kept arriving, but gradually, the batteries began to run down. The antennas began drifting off alignment, and then one day, the signals stopped forever. Today, in 2026, these missions are nearly forgotten. The Soviet Union no longer exists. The old records are scattered. Many of the scientists who worked on the mission are no longer alive, yet their data still survives in NASA's archives. Even now, Vega 1's 95 images and Vega 2's 39 images can still be downloaded, and whenever a scientist says that the building blocks of life may have come to Earth through comets, Vega's data remains part of the foundation of that idea. There is one more thing worth clearing up. In many places online, you will find claims that Vega actually landed on Halley's comet and recorded footage from its surface. That is completely false. Halley has no solid ground like a planet does. Vega never landed on the comet. Every image it captured was taken from a distance of more than 8,000 kilometers. So this is the story of two Soviet spacecraft that first survived the hell of Venus. They floated balloons there, they landed landers there. Then they used Venus's gravity assist to hurl themselves toward a cosmic monster. They delivered data the world had never seen before. They helped guide Europe's mission. They gave humanity evidence that life itself may have roots in comet dust. And then, quietly, they disappeared into the darkness of space. Even today, Vega 1 and Vega the 2nd of May still be drifting somewhere through the solar system, alone, silent, and forgotten, two missions that never found their way home. I hope you learned something new from today's video. If you did, make sure to like this video and share it with your friends. And if you are new here, subscribe to XY Lume and turn on the notification bell so you do not miss the next episode. And if you enjoyed this one, then I highly recommend you watch the next video on XY Lume, where we explored the invisible boundary of the universe, a boundary that is constantly moving toward us, and once anything crosses to the other side, it never returns. But what exactly is that boundary, and why is it moving closer to us? Go watch that video to find out. It is seriously fascinating. I will see you in the next episode. Bye.